What is going on, YouTube, and welcome back to another episode of my series, Scrims for Dummies. Now, I'm finally back at school, so my background's not quite as bland as it used to be, and the quality should be a lot better because I got my camera here and some better lighting. And if you guys want to see a setup tour, please give this video a thumbs up and let me know in the comments. But without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about late game. First, let's define what exactly is an endgame. I classify endgame as from when the half and half zone appears until the game ends. Now, how do you win an endgame? Let's start with rotations. Endgames can be very hectic, and sometimes it can be confusing on where zone is pulling. I find it helpful to put a marker on the map to give yourself an idea of where you need to rotate. Try to plan out your rotations before you go and take note of any major elevation changes or players you may have to rotate around. Half and half zone and first moving are, in my opinion, the most difficult zones to rotate to if it pulls max distance. A tip in rotating in zones like these is to plan your rotates around your loadout and be aware of what players around you are doing. Let's say you have 4 floppers and you notice the person next to you is not making any effort to rotate. Chances are he probably has a launch pad. Be patient, tank storm a few seconds, eat a flopper or two, and wait for him to place the launch pad. Oh, and by the way, if you guys want some tips on how to rotate safely with a launch pad, check out this video I made. Now let's talk about a different scenario. Maybe you don't have a launch pad, white heels, and some scuffed mats. If this is the case, try to follow someone else rotating and use their old builds for protection. Just be careful behind you when doing this, because someone could be doing the same thing as you and you could get beamed from behind. Also, try to avoid running directly through the middle of zone or you'll get fried instantly. Instead, try to rotate around the edge of the zone to minimize the directions people can shoot at you from. This clip of Benji is a perfect example of how to rotate into half and half zone. As you can see, he rotates around the edge, uses the old builds from the guy in front of him, and doesn't use a lot of materials. Now let's talk about a more ideal situation. Let's say you get half and half zone. Depending on your health and loot, you may want to sit in your box a few seconds and look for some picks people gliding or trying to rotate the whole way around. But do not get tunnel vision and don't wait too long, because getting ahead of zone is something that a lot of newer competitive players struggle with. Check out Mr. Savage here. He hits this guy for 142. He knows he's one shot. Does Mr. Savage push? No, he rotates into zone because he's 200 IQ and does not get tunnel vision. Staying ahead of zone is extremely important and puts yourself in a great position to pick up some extra kills. Another tip I have for 5th and 6th zone rotations is to avoid getting tagged for white at all costs. If you get tagged a bunch of shields, do everything you can to not let your shield get cracked. When someone cracks your shield, people around you can hear that, and it'll make you a weak target that everyone will begin to focus. Go ahead and take the extra few seconds, pop all the shield that you have, because you do not want to be that guy that everyone in the lobby focuses. On the other side of this scenario, if you hear someone's shields get cracked, don't be afraid to take a few shots at him. You may catch him at an angle he's not expecting and pick up a free kill. Another mistake I see newer players do is trying to be overly conservative with their mats. Being conservative is good, but there's a point where maybe you don't build that extra wall because you think no one is looking and bam, you're dead. Think about it. Would you rather get top 10 and have no mats or die 30th with almost max mats just because you're trying to be overly conservative? Now let's move on to end game. The last few zones of the game can be very hectic and difficult to maneuver through, but there are a few things you can do to help you survive as long as possible. Let's start with taking height. Seems like the obvious thing to do, right? Well, it's not that easy. Any decent player on height will be pressuring anyone trying to take their high ground. There are a few ways to counter this though. First is griefing height as much as possible. If you have an RPG or a heavy sniper and have the mats to take height, try to shoot out whoever's on height and crank up as fast as you can. Or you can use a launch pad to height, but there's a good chance you would get beamed. So you may have to land in storm first and then build up on whoever's on height. Lastly, you can use fish to sit in storm and then build up on whoever is tarping out on height. Your opponent will most likely not be expecting to be contested from anyone in zone, and you could get some easy high ground. Check out this clip of Scoped in a cash cup executing this perfectly. He picks up 2 slurpfish on the elim he just got, eats both of them, and rockets out high ground, and just like that, Scoped has height. Okay, now that you've got height, let's talk about how to keep height. Like I said earlier, any good player has height will be pressuring anyone trying to contest them, and you should do the same if you manage to get height. For the most part, you want to pressure whoever is second highest up or second height, because that person will be the biggest threat to taking your high ground. On the other side of that, if you are second height, you need to change layers. We'll cover that later. When tarping on height, try to stay ahead of zone like I mentioned earlier and hold anyone trying to rotate. Also, try to connect to other builds and use hardened mats such as brick or metal to make your tarp more difficult to shoot out. If you build in wood, you can be shut out very quickly and opponents could see that you might be running low on materials and want to contest you. Now let's move on to rotating through the middle layers of an endgame. The two main tips I have for this is changing layers often and editing down to look for picks from low ground. Let's start with changing layers. It is extremely important to avoid rotating on congested layers in an endgame. By congested layer, I mean a layer that a lot of other players are also trying to rotate on. Trying to maneuver through a congested layer will put yourself in a lot of awkward situations and make rotations very difficult. Try to change layers either up or down where there are less players and build your own tunnels that you can edit out of and make plays. Also, if you guys want some help on how to tunnel, I made a vid on it last week, I'll link it right here. After you manage to build your own tunnel and get ahead of zone, edit your floors to look down for players on low ground trying to rotate. Players rotating low ground tend to have little to no mats or health, so you could pick up some easy kills on some helpless players. Lastly, let's talk about low ground. When should you begin to drop for low ground? I would say when you get down to 10 builds, start to drop for low ground. If you wait until you have no builds, it makes it very difficult to get that impact frag you need. Having an extra build or two can save you from getting sprayed, or let you take someone's wall to get in their box. Another tip I have is don't be afraid to tank some storm. Tanking a few ticks of storm to sneak up on another player on low ground can help you catch them off guard and pick up a frag when you need it most. While we're on the topic of tanking storm, just because you see a gold scar sitting in storm, don't be silly and take 5 ticks of zone to upgrade your purple scar to a gold scar. Only tank storm for serious upgrades such as mythic guns, white heals, or shields. Additionally, it is important to keep track of your loadout and materials. Use your utility weapons to their fullest potential. For example, use a harpoon gun to grab some extra mats, or even get into someone's box to get that impact frag. All in all, if you really want to improve in winning competitive endgames, you have to practice putting yourself in all different scenarios. Force yourself to try to take height some games. Get yourself comfortable in every situation, and I promise you, you will see results. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Also, if you want to support me even more, use code Milano when buying skins in the item shop. Shout out to all these people who already use my code. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget, if you want a shout out in my next video, send me a picture of you using my code on my Twitter or Instagram and I'll add you to the list. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.